So once again, uh, a beautiful morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone. First, I would like to extend my genuine thankfulness to the Future of Education 2021 organizers, especially to Dr. Austin and to our chairman, Dr. Brian, and also to our panelists. Thank you so much for giving me a platform to share my love for research and to other people. I am hoping and I could be able to return this through my presentation. And please to our audience, to our participants, please brace yourself because I am hoping to give a lot of comprehensive information about the topic itself. Okay? Awareness, change of perspective, and commitment. These are the three terms I would want to accentuate with my topic this morning before dealing with the statistical tools. Once again, a beautiful morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone. I am Sir Albert Dizon, an advocate of positive education, upholding the positive influence of leadership and deeply in love to research, and one of your featured speakers in this conference. So, to begin with, no matter what career field you're in or how high up you are, there's always more to learn, correct? The same applies to your personal life. No matter how many experiences you have or how diverse your social circle, there are things you do not know. Correct? That is the reason why we have this conference. That is the reason why we keep on researching. We keep on conducting research for us to be able to understand how these things are happening. We are conducting research for us to be able to solve a certain problem in our setting. Research unlocks the unknowns. Let's explore the world from the different perspectives and fuels a deeper understanding. In some areas, research is an essential part of success. Am I correct? For example, I've heard one of our presenters now is as an assistant professor, and he mentioned about the best practices that they are doing when it comes to formative assessments. And these assessments are basically used for them to achieve an increase when it comes to the academic performance of their students. Another presenter mentioned about sustainable development goals. I love SDGs, and I really want to incorporate those SDGs in the curriculum because I believe these are the things that we need to pander. And because of the research, we can be able to achieve success. And the first thing that you must adhere with is your awareness. Am I correct? Awareness to what is really happening in your environment and what must urgently be addressed. This is what research is trying to emancipate in whatever interest that we have conducting a research. It is a knowledge or perception of a situation or fact concerned about well-informed interest in a particular situation or development. Moreover, whether it's a personal or professional problem, it helps to look outside yourself for help. Depending on what the issue is, your research can focus on what others have done before. You might not just need more information. So you can make an informed plan of attack and an informed decision. When you know you've collected good information, you'll feel much more confident in your solution. And that is basically awareness. One more thing, the main purpose of research or the main purposes of research are the following: inform action, gather evidence for theories, and contribute to developing knowledge in a field of study. Since you are aware now that what is really happening or there is an existing problem in your setting, in your institution, in your community, there must be a mindset of being an active and great contributor to resolve this issue. Am I correct? And I hope we adhere or we uphold that mindset that we are conducting research for us to be an active and great contributor to resolve these issues that we are currently facing. But then again, let us remember that before acting out, before we move, because I know you're very much passionate to solve such particular problem, gathering of significant pieces of evidence must be considered. These pieces of evidence will serve as your tools to determine how to come up with an intervention in reassuring of a smooth direction towards the problem. Likewise, the results must be authentic, valid, and reliable, for they will be added in the knowledge of everyone. I hope you can actually follow what I am referring to. This significant evidence, this significant pieces of evidence will help us to understand how to contribute greatly in resolving these issues. And remember, research is what propels humanity forward. Having curiosity and love of learning take you far in life. And I think we have this love of learning, or love for learning, or love for research. Remember, research opens up to different opinions and new ideas. And that is the reason why we have panelists. Am I correct? Of course, when you conducted such particular study, when you defended that to your panelists, given your school, given your schooling, but then again, once you present still your study in such a platform, in this platform, there are still questions, because your study will open to different opinions and ideas to better the results, to better the recommendations. It's fueled because it is fueled by curiosity. We get curious, ask questions, and immerse ourselves in discovering everything there is to know. I've read a question a while back in our chat box, uh, from our panel, one of our panelists. He asked, "Is this SDGs, or are these SDGs incorporated in the curriculum, in your curriculum?" So if the answer is no, again, that would be the time that you enter research, that you enter the power of research. Without curiosity and research, progress would slow to a halt. And our lives, we know, would be completely different. Am I correct? I believe the researches that you have conducted made a great implications, made a great contribution to what your school is trying to provide right now. Remember that staying updated prevents you from falling behind, and giving info that's inaccurate or doesn't paint the whole picture. With the latest info, I believe you'll be better equipped to talk about a subject and build on ideas. And we, again, uh, avoid becoming ignorant and unaware. Am I correct? You know what? The very reason why other teachers, or I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, other teachers are afraid to conduct a research. Why? Because they are being ignorant to what research can provide to the society, to what research can actually contribute to the betterment of pedagogies, to the betterment of the strategies that we have. For example, in providing quality education, in enhancing the performance of our students. We wouldn't know that even though bees are not our favorites, they do a job that help us all. Correct? Just like in research. If we try to understand the power of research, I think we would be able to survive whatever problems that we encounter. in our institution. And we will not be afraid in dealing with problems in our schools by just merely conducting uh, action research. Remember, without research, we could not possibly have survived as long as we have. Just like what we are experiencing at present. For without research, vaccines are not produced nor being improved to fight against this COVID-19. For without the research, the contract tracing will not be developed. And this pandemic shall continue more than we could ever imagine. For without the research, we still miss our family members who are working to other countries. For without research, we still stuck in the traditional notion about educational system, which is fully teacher-centered. And lastly, for without the research, we won't be able to have such a webinar, which is truly significant to one and all. And yes, there are still millions of things that have yet to be discovered. Diseases to cure, waters to explore, strategies to mix, to integrate. All of these are possible because of research. Because of research. Let us take a look to what Nokia Corporation had experienced because of neglecting the power of research in terms of improvements and technological innovation. Do you know what happened to Nokia Corporation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for that answer. You know what? Nokia's mobile phones story exemplifies a common trait we see in mature, successful companies. Success breeds conservatism and hubris, which over time results in a decline of the strategy processes, leading to poor strategic decisions. Where once companies embrace new ideas and experimentation to spur growth, with success they become risk-averse and less innovative. Such considerations will be crucial for companies that want to grow and avoid of the biggest disruptive threats to their future, their own success. You know what? Nokia Corporation declined when it comes to its progress because of this lack of innovation, resourcefulness, and strategic decisions to how they will improve their devices, their products. And it leads to the idea that Nokia Corporation lacks the understanding about how research could possibly help them uh, to go with the flow or fight to compete to other corporations, to other mobile companies. Working on a research project will obviously be a challenging and yet rewarding experience. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe you conducted your research arduously, but then again, it's fulfilling. It's rewarding because we can actually, for example, what you have done right now by accepting the challenge to present your study not only in your institution but globally, but internationally. I believe there are lots of participants who've learned, and I myself learned from your studies, and that is the rewarding experience, provided you put the best of your expertise and skill in it. I'm so sorry. I'm dealing with this information before we proceed because I want to share the purpose of this research, and I want you to continue conducting researches, writing researches for the betterment of humanity. The main aim of the goals is to provide the best of the solution to some of the world problems and also to enhance our knowledge. We cannot negate that there are instances that your results are not appropriate to other settings, and that is okay. Okay, that is okay because we have utilized, okay, we have asked, we have interviewed different groups of individuals. We have different cultures, we have different understanding to a particular concept. But then again, let us not eradicate the notion that this can be a serve this can serve as a basis of, or this can be a foundation to a study of other people. How does research impact our daily life? Research is to see what everybody else has seen and to think what nobody else has thought. I believe, okay, I believe uh our teachers, for example, our teachers knew that there is an existing problem in terms of pedagogies, in terms of the system that we have in our institution. For example, I am taking now the Doctor of Education here in the Philippines, and I am hearing a lot of sentiments from my classmates in terms of this online distance learning. See, they are aware of the existing problems that they are encountering. But then again, okay, they do not know how to resolve this. Why? Because they are not conducting yet research. They are not conducting yet a study about this. Because whatever claims that you have right now, they are just claims. They are not validated claims unless, yes, you conduct a research. The second significant thought that I would like to share to everyone is the change of perspective. Remember, nothing lasts forever. There is no emotion or situation that will last forever. Life ebbs and flows. And the good and bad in life will come and go eternally. If I can remember that and tap into the deeper meaning behind what I am experiencing, then I accept what I am going through with greater ease. Remember, we have a choice in how we view things. We have a choice on how to emancipate ourselves from these problems. This is what we really need in writing a research. We need to make sure we see things in other way around for us to see what is not being seen by the other people and be able to help them filling up such loophole. Changing your perspective is basically uh teaching you on how to become resourceful or even innovative in dealing with problems. For problems are due to misconstrued information, opinions, and our very own diversities. Consequently, pondering to a more authentic, powerful, and comprehensive ideas to better the society. Remember, changing your perspective is like changing the window which you view the world. When you change how you view the world, you change how you feel about it. And so, let's also change the way we see research. Let us try to transpire this change of perspectives to our fellow educators, to our colleagues. Yes, it needs a thorough understanding about the content. But if you think it is for a bigger perspective, or a bigger advantage rather, to the humanity, I think there is no reason not to pursue this action. Correct? Are you still there? Can you please type yes? A big yes if you're still there and you are still listening to, agreeing with what I am
Yes.
basically trying to mention. Thank you so much for this. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Austin, Sir, Dr. Ricardo, and the others. Thank you so much. I didn't know if
Ano
you're aware with
naman?
this, or you have watched the Korean drama series Startup, where a group of individuals, the main characters, decided to create an app for the blind people. It is an app for them to be able to understand the text they are reading through an audio, or should I say, this app helps them to read. And I think this is basically what we must uphold as researchers. Whether we are writing a qualitative and or quantitative research, you must out the accents on the you must out the accents on the end goal, which is the result part, and how this will be implied to the bigger picture or bigger community. Now, given your results, given your analysis from your studies, what will happen now? What will happen now? What are the implications of these results of this analysis to your school community? Are we just aiming to present this study in this platform? Are we just aiming for 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 our research to be published? I hope not, because there is a greater uh, purpose of why we conducted such research, of why we are conducting a research. In the broadest sense of the term, social responsiveness is what I am trying to emphasize to everyone in writing our research, because we, as educators, we are not just here to teach our students, but we are here to become socially responsible in dealing with so much social issues. Social responsiveness is a person's obligation to contribute to their community or country in a way that makes the quality of life and environment better for those around them. Another story that I would want to, a movie that I would want to emphasize is The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. I do not know, again, can you please type yes if you're familiar with this movie? The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. This is one of the movies which inspired me to love research, to love what curiosity can make. Okay, in my existence, in my purpose as an educator. This movie helped me to learn that it's very important for us, or for me, to stay curious and never stop learning. It also helped me to understand and give emphasis or importance to research. It also emphasizes the power or the advantage of starting small. You know what? In conducting a research, it doesn't mean that you need to think big, to contribute bigger things in our society. Let's start with small steps. Practice leadership and persuasion, and we are sharing our vision. You know what? The very purpose that, the very reason you are conducting a research, because you are sharing a vision, and that vision is you are trying to emphasize, to exude to our colleagues that there are solutions with our problems. There are possible solutions in our problems. Just like now, we are experiencing a pandemic, right? I believe we have the same cases, if not so severe, but we are experiencing a pandemic in our country, and we are not yet done fighting with it. But then again, because of research, with the help of our scientists, with the help of our researchers, I believe our hope that this will end will be plausible. And I think, sorry, sorry. And I think all of this lies in one word, and that is commitment. Commitment to yourself, commitment to the body of knowledge, commitment to your community, or in general, for the greater good of every individual. Your commitment to research is and should be of foremost important. Just like to share some of the photos that I have captured when I am delivering what they call this my study, different topics about positive education. Yes, I love discussing positive education because that is my advocacy. Transcending optimism in education, transcending optimism in school management, and that is my commitment. And because of research, I am able to contribute to my audience because what I am sharing are based or results from my conducted research or conducted researches. I just also want to share these two uh, topics which we are conducting right now with my advices, with my research advices. They're actually police officers. They are police officers. Rationalizing Forensic Research and Development Division, developing a health and safety guidelines and conducting autopsies. See, the purpose of these researches is to better their performance, to better the service, their public service. And this is what I am trying to point out. This is what I am trying to point out. That that research, conducting research is for the common good of other people. Social responsiveness, again, is a person's obligation to contribute to their community or country. Thankfully, schools are becoming more concerned with science and technology, and research is finding its place in the minds of today's students. Students are eager to make discoveries, create solutions to the world's problems, and invent the next big thing. As a research teacher in a Don Bosco school, I've always mentioned that writing a research is becoming futuristic. It's becoming futuristic. A person who envisions in providing options to the humanity. The starting point is subsequently, as lovers of research, may we find the reasons why do we need to start, right? Or may we teach our students how will they start writing their paper courageously and without any hesitations. The starting point is very crucial. Knowing what concentration of your study would be. And of course, is it meaningful? I mean, will your results benefit the humanity? What will happen now with your results, recommendations, and conclusions? Therefore, I am emphasizing to be futuristic and to be able to identify how significant, meaningful, purposeful your study would be. You know what? Transpiring the essence of your study shall commence right after you presented your data. I hope at the end of this conference, you are able to say in yourself or to yourself that you are ready to share this, to expand this study, to deepen this study, so that I would be a socially responsible individual. Awareness, change of perspective, commitment. These are the three words I would want you to uphold once you teach research. Every time you write your paper and every time you concluded your study. Open your eyes to what we can give to the society. Let us change our perspective to vividly see what are the possibilities that we can do in our society. And please, please, keep in mind that once you have started, no more turning back. Brace yourself and let your commitment works for you. Let us push ourselves to turn our ideas into something greater. Consequently, it is a must to be aware of changing our perspective on how we see things and be committed to becoming socially responsive. But then again, but of course, writing a research is not merely about all those things that I have mentioned. Yes, they are important. We now see the purpose why we are writing a research. But the question now, or the fearful one, or the fearful aspect that we need to address is, how do we write a research? Since this is still a technical writing, let me say that technicalities also matter. If we will not be able to consider the following concepts, which will I deliver, it is tantamount to saying that there's no point of writing this. It's a waste of time. Really, you have done nothing. And I think this is what our colleagues are trying to point out, why they are not conducting a research, because there are a lot of aspects that you need to consider. And these are not just aspects, these are complex aspects, complex facades of research. Let's imagine we are researching the effects of children eating carrots 3 times a week, for example. To do this, we will divide households into two categories. Those who eat carrots at least 3 times a week, and those who do not. Our results show that a positive relationship exists between children who need glasses and children who do not eat carrots often. Should we conclude that children who eat carrots at least 3 times a week will have better eyesight? Before we answer this question, let's think about research methods. If, if you are going to understand an area of study, you have to become familiar with the research method, its uses. This is basically important for the study of human growth and development because many different research designs can be used. Different research methods have different purposes and different levels of validity. You know that. For example, qualitative versus quantitative. Will your data take the form of words or numbers? You will be using, are you going to use primary versus secondary if you will collect original data yourself? Or will you use data that has already been collected by someone else? Will you use descriptive or experimental? Will you take measurements of something as it is, or will you perform an experiment? How are you going to analyze your data? You can use, or yes, you may use statistical analysis methods to test relationships between variables, or you can use methods such as thematic analysis. These are some of the things that we need to consider before we what they call this, before we move, before we act, before we conduct our research. These are the preliminary things that we need to ponder, that we need to contemplate. It is a must to everyone to to identify what research methodology you would want to use in conducting your research. Will you use qualitative, quantitative, or mixed method? You know what? As a research teacher, I always tell my students to be futuristic. I've mentioned this a while back. Yes, the first step is trying to deal with an interesting yet purposeful problem that will serve as your topic. But it doesn't stop there. You should also be thinking of other parts of a research, and one of which is your methodology. You know what? I ask my students before they write, after giving me their topic. Yes, the topic's good. I would say that. But the next questions would be, what are your variables in your study? Are they quantitative or qualitative? What are your expected data? How will you gather your data? So see, these are the questions that we need to deal with before we write our research. Because it will determine what are the step-by-step procedure that we need to undergo. For example, I believe before we write our research, we ask ourselves, is it qualitative? Am I about to use a research method, qualitative method, or quantitative method, or mixed method? Let's start qualitative research method. Qualitative research is expressed in words. It is used to understand concepts, thoughts, or experiences. That is the reason why in conducting or in using such method, we are utilizing static analysis to interpret patterns and meanings in the data, to give meanings, to categorize their responses. This type of research enables you to gather in-depth insights on topics that are not well understood. That is why common qualitative methods include interviews with open-ended questions, observations described in words, and literature reviews that explore concepts and theories. And these are some of the characteristics. We have natural environment or natural setting. Qualitative researchers collect field data at the collections where participants experience the problem or issue to be studied. That is the reason why some researchers using qualitative data, they immerse themselves, correct? They immerse themselves to observe what is really happening in that particular community. Second, researcher as a key instrument. You are the instrument. Why? Because you will conduct the observation, you will conduct the interview and whatnot. Multiple sources of data. Multiple sources of data. Of course, since you only use, okay, a small number of respondents, it's very important for us to gather resources. And these are literature reviews to strengthen your claims, to strengthen your conclusions, to validate your conclusions. Inductive analysis is being used, or inductive data analysis is being used. Qualitative researchers build categories, patterns, and themes from the ground up. Inductive or from separate data into a complete conclusions. Right? That is, you conducted qualitative research. And you know that from the responses of your interviewees, you will now write, or you will now actually form categories, or should I say themes. And these themes will now be your basis in writing your conclusions to answer your research questions. the meaning of the participants. In the entire research process, the researcher must focus on studying the meaning obtained from the participants about the issue or research problem, not the meaning conveyed by the authors or researchers in certain literatures. I would like to accentuate this. Sometimes, uh, I or no, not sometimes. Oh, most of the times, before we conduct our research, we already have the expected results, correct? From our end. For example, you want to determine the relationship between the academic performance of your students and the online distance learning, or the use of the LMS or the learning management system that you have in your institution. You already have the expected answer, or you know the expected result or association. And sometimes, if we didn't get such expected answer, we get frustrated. We get disappointed. And I want you to eradicate such mindset, because the purpose of research is, yes, to test our uh uh not to test our claims. Meaning to say, if we are testing the claims, it could be possible, it could not be possible. It would be an answer or it would not be an answer. Our claims would be accepted or will not be accepted. We have to accept that instance. So I hope we use the responses of our respondents, the answers of our respondents in determining uh, results or analysis. Theoretical perspective. Sorry. Qualitative researchers often use certain perspective in conducting research, such as ethnography, cultural concepts, gender differences, race, and others. That is why, okay, in qualitative research, we have this what we call phenomenology. Okay, we are trying to understand the current situation of our participant or of our respondents. Why? Because we are giving definitions, we are describing, we are explaining such phenomenon, such theory existing in such particular community or setting. Design that develops. Qualitative researchers argue that qualitative research is always evolving and dynamic. And that is correct. That is the reason why we always recommend at the end of our research study. Interpretive. We interpret what we interpret what we hear, what our respondents hear, what we understand, what our respondents understand. Usually, there are differences in interpretation between researchers and readers and participants. So it appears that qualitative research offers different views on a content or problem, right? And that is okay. And we shouldn't be or we should agree uh that sometimes we disagree to some interpretation or analysis. Holistic account. Qualitative researchers usually try to make a complex picture of a research issue or problem. Researchers describe the perspectives and factors associated with the problem as a whole, and that is again because of the themes, the classifications, the inductive data analysis that we use. So basically, these are what qualitative research method is. Now we proceed to quantitative, and we need to deal with this. The first characteristic of quantitative data research method is the data is usually gathered using structured research instruments. Unlike in qualitative research method, quantitative used a structured research instruments. Tell something about adapted questionnaire, modified questionnaire, and self-constructed questionnaire. You know what? We have to identify, we have to know if we're going to use modified questionnaire, adapted questionnaire, and self-constructed questionnaire. And I would say it's, for me, it's important to understand the definitions that we have in our study before we write questionnaire, before we decide that, okay, I'll be using self-constructed questionnaire. Why? Because sometimes our questions are not fit to what we are asking to our respondents, to what we are looking for as responses. So it's better to have a basis of our questionnaire. And of course, we need to modify our questionnaire. Why? Sometimes, yes, we can search questionnaires from online, but then again, we need to contextualize it. We need to contextualize such questionnaire because that questionnaire is pertaining or used in such a different setting. Make sure the items are relevant to what you are claiming in your study and how did you define your variables. Some terms in your study. For the questionnaire is the basis of whatever results you will be gathering and interpreting. Remember, if you have used wrong questionnaire, incorrect questionnaire, and the items are also incorrect or inappropriate, it will lead to incorrect statistical analysis. You cannot use your statistical test. So see, there are a lot of connections, okay, when it comes to the parts of a research. And you have to plan for this. Second, the results are based on larger sample sizes that are representative of the population. Make sure that your samples are best representatives of your population. Otherwise, the results of your study won't make a generalization about it. Remember, the purpose of getting the samples is for you to make sure to make it's for you to make some assumptions about the population. How will it be possible if this do not have the characteristics of your population? Besides, the larger the sample size, the more accurate the results would, or should I say, the assumption. The larger the sample sizes, the reliable your study would be. For example, I want to determine the effectiveness of online distance learning. I would be asking the parents, do you think they can actually give me an accurate answer, authentic answer, or response? Of course not. Yes, they can see that their children are struggling, but the students themselves will be our samples, should be our samples because they are the ones experiencing this online distance learning, and also our teachers. If I would be just asking one student to determine the effectiveness of this online distance learning, do you think it would be reliable? Of course not. How about 10 students? Again, no. But then again, 1 versus 10 students, okay, there is an increase of reliability. There's an increase of the consistency of the analysis. So that is quantitative research design. That is the reason why in quantitative, the more the respondents, the better. But again, we use formulas to get such. We can use Slovin's formula or we can use a Rausoft formula. Okay, in getting the exact number of respondents of our study. Okay? Next, the research study can usually be replicated or repeated given its high reliability. Since a study is just an assumption and must be verified to different contexts, it is true that there is a high possibility to replicate or repeat this one. This is done to test the reliability of the analysis. Remember, the reliability is referring to consistency. Thus, the higher the number of getting the same results, the higher the reliability. And the higher the people would understand and consider your analysis. Next, the researcher has a clearly defined research question to which objective answers are sought. I would like to accentuate on this one. Remember, in research, there is a major problem that needs to be answered, correct? And or to be obtained a general answer. But then again, before realizing a general overview, it is a must for a researcher to construct specific questions, to obtain specific answers, which is which are needed to utilize in coming up the desired answer, correct? With that being said, quantitative research will have more objective questions, for it needs to gather data which can be classified as to what type of data these are and be able to contemplate a statistical test. And later on, you will understand why I am emphasizing to understand this all. Because we cannot decide yet, okay, given this study, I would use Pearson R. I will use MANOVA. I will use linear regression. No. We have to consider other aspects, one of which is your research questions. Next, all aspects of the study are carefully designed before data is collected. And that is what I am trying to point out. Since the questions are objective and to the would-be gathered data, it is just rightful to say that a researcher must be carefully scrutinize the preliminary steps. First, the construction of the objective questions. Just like what I have mentioned, this will be the basis of whatever data that you would gather, meaning make sure they are relative to your study. For example, you want to determine the level of complacency of our students. You have to understand that that is your variable, the level of complacency of your students. Now, you have to ask yourselves, what are the specific statements that would lead to the level of complacency of my students? And this will be now your basis in writing your objective research question. Another is that these questions also will indicate what type of statistical treatment and or statistical tool you will have. Furthermore, there is another point that you will consider. Given your topic or title, what are your variables? What are your expected data again? How will you gather your data? These are the things which somehow redirect you towards the success of completing your study accurately. Data are in the form of numbers and statistics, often arranged in tables, charts, figures, or other non-textual forms. Well, quantitative research method is truly known for using numerical data to interpret and provide conclusions based on what you want to know in your study and what you would want to share to the society. These numbers can be used whether to validate your claim, test your claim if they are accepted or not, with the help of course, the p-value, with the help of the correlation coefficient, we can be able to identify the association of our variables. These numbers also can be utilized to form some conjectures, since it tells the degree of association or relationship, even the effect of one intervention to other. And it also helps in writing programs in our school. For example, you determine that what they call this. I'm trying to remember the strategy, the blockchain. I think the blockchain. In terms of the curriculum, if we want to validate, for example, we adhere that it's very effective in terms of increasing the performance, academic performance of our students. Therefore, we can write something about that. Projects can be used to generalize concept more widely, predict future results, or investigate causal relationships. Since we are using numbers and statistics, and this can be converted to tabular or graphical forms, it is easier for us to predict outcomes of a certain relationship. For instance, you're talking about the relationship of academic performance and the attendance of students. Using a scatter plot table, it would be facilely for a researcher to give some assumptions to generalize situation, whether the attendance affects the academic performance of the students or the academic performance students is being affected by the attendance of these students. This methodology also will verify some theories obtained in writing a qualitative research. Given the proximity of the results of quantitative through projections, it would be easier to validate now the stand of qualitative. Last, the researcher uses tools such as questionnaires or computer software to collect numerical data. I have mentioned that a while back that the research who writes quantitative research shall be restricted to use questionnaires in gathering data, since the answers must be specific. The data must be concrete and authentic. Likewise, the very reason for such is to be able to utilize the gathered data as inputs to whatever computer software or application a researcher uses in delivering an interpretation from their analysis, which is gained based from statistical treatments, which is basically our goal of this presentation. To be able to understand, given our expected data, what type of statistical test that we need to utilize. Let's now identify the different research designs. In using quantitative research method, we have descriptive, correlational, comparative, experimental. In my presentation, I would be dealing with correlational. Okay? Now, what is or how do we use or how or when will we use descriptive research design? First, it seeks to describe the current status of an identified variable. For example, you want to determine, you want to create a description of how second grade students spend their time during summer vacation. That is just descriptive. You are just describing, okay, how these grade 2 students are spending their summer vacation. Another, a description of the tobacco use habits of teenagers. Again, that is descriptive. Why? Because you are just explaining, okay, you are just identifying why these teenagers use tobacco as their habit. Or what are the reasons? What are the contributing factors why teenagers use tobacco? Another, a description of the attitudes of scientists regarding global warming. What is their understanding? What is their claim? What is their idea about global warming? A description of the extent to which elementary teachers use math manipulatives. How SDGs are being integrated in the school, or are they emphasizing SDGs or the Sustainable Development Goals from one of our presenters a while back? They are merely describing. The researcher does not usually begin with a hypothesis, correct? Because remember, in hypothesis, we have the null and the alternative. And the purpose of such hypothesis is for us to test these, whether we have association, significant relationship, significant difference. But in descriptive, we develop one after collecting data. Once we gather the factors, and now we want to determine how these factors affect one another in terms of the implication to our respondents, to our samples. Next, we have correlational. It attempts to determine the extent of a relationship between two or more variables using statistical data. Usually, we use such research design. For example, the relationship between intelligence and self-esteem. Is it tantamount to saying that if you have a higher self-esteem, you're intelligent, you'll become more intelligent, you have the qualities of being a smart student? If we want to address that, we will be using correlational research design. In this type of design, relationships between and among a number of facts are sought and interpreted. This type of research will recognize trends and patterns in data. What affects the relationship? How strong the relationship is. But it doesn't not go so far in its analysis to prove causes for these observed patterns. Correlational research design is just answering there is a significant relationship, there is no significant relationship. Correlational research design doesn't answer why is there a significant relationship? Why is there an association? Cause and effect is not the basis of this type of observational research. The data, relationships, and distributions of variables are studied on only. For example, the relationship between an aptitude test and success in an algebra course or subject. See, we are not saying that the aptitude test is basically their scores in the aptitude test is basically affected to what they see, to how they see rather their success in algebra, how they perceive algebra as their course. We are just answering the question of the relationship, the extent of the relationship of the aptitude test, their scores, to what they see, to how they perceive algebra course. Variables are not manipulated. They are only identified and are studied as they occur in natural setting. Sometimes correlational research is considered a type of descriptive research and not as its own type of research, as no variables are manipulated in the study. Unlike in experimental research design, isn't it, we have what we call the experimental group, wherein this particular group is being what they call this is being introduced by an intervention or by a treatment. Unlike in correlational design, as is, we ask the for example, the level of stress of our students, the level of their coping mechanism. That's it. We are not basically preparing them to manage their stress, to manage their coping mechanism. Comparative research design, or what we call the quasi-experimental research design. It attempts to establish cause and effect relationship among variables. For example, we want to determine the effect of preschool attendance on social maturity at the end of the first grade. The effect of taking multivitamins on a student's school absenteeism. The effects of gender on algebra achievement. See, we are comparing our variables. We are getting the cause and effect relationship of the variables. This type of design are very similar to true experiments, but with some key difference. An independent variable is identified but not manipulated by the experimenter. That is the reason why it is also called as quasi-experimental research design. Because the independent variable is not manipulated. We randomly select our respondents, unlike in experimental. And the effects of the independent variable on the dependent variable are measured. The researcher does not randomly assign groups and must use ones that are naturally formed or pre-existing groups. Identify control groups exposed to the treatment variable are studied and compared to groups who are not. Last, when analysis and conclusions are made, determining causes must be done carefully, as other variables, both known and unknown, could still affect the outcome. Experimental, it is often called true experimentation, which uses the scientific method to establish cause and effect relationship among a group of variables that make up a study. This is when to select who will be your experimental group and the control group. A true experiment study is any study where an effort is made to identify and impose control over all the variables except one. That is why if you are using experimental research design, it takes time. It takes time. Because you are imposing something, right? You are introducing a treatment. And for you to be able to determine the effectiveness of that treatment, it will take time for you to see the result. Sometimes subjects are randomly assigned to experimental treatments rather than identified in naturally occurring groups. But remember, in utilizing experimental research design, all you must remember is you have the same level of characteristics or participants. They have the same age, for example, they have the same GWA, for example. You are comparing the what they call this, the grades of the what they call this, the effectiveness of this module, just like what I have done in my study. Before I determine my experimental and the control group, I see to it that they have the same level of, they have the same GWA, or the general weighted average, for me to determine, okay, after giving the post test, after giving the last assessment, I would see the difference. I would see the increase. I would see the stable GWA or not. Okay? Now, of course, after we identify our research method, and then we identify the we identify our research design. This time, let's try to consider, or let's try to ponder the importance of understanding variables. Because understanding variables, identifying what type of variable that we have, it leads us to the idea what are our expected data. And of course, if we know the expected data, that would be the time that we know what statistical treatment that we need to use. I hope you see now the process or the phasing. Okay? Okay. The central purpose of research is to solve problems and improve the welfare of the society. To research is to search or investigate exhaustively. It is a careful or diligent search, studious inquiry, or examination, especially investigation or experimentation aimed at discovery and interpretation of facts, revision of accepted theories or laws in the light of new facts, revision of application or the practical applications. Thus, we need to make sure we collect correct information to do that, to 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 succeed to those concepts. We need to determine the correct variables that we need to ask. Anything that can vary in research due to circumstances is called a variable. However, based on what has been learned in the current research course, the principal aim of this paper to explain in parts how the types of variables, the relationship between dependent and independent variables, and their importance can be used in research. And so at this point, let us try to figure out the different variables that we need to know before starting to determine the correct statistical tool needed to complete our study. Let's start with the dependent and independent variable. The relationship between independent variable and dependent variables is to those independent variables causes a change in dependent variable. And that it's not possible that a dependent variable could cause a change in an independent variable. That is why dependent variable relies and can be changed by other components. And these other components are what we call independent variable. For example, time spent studying causes a change in test score. And it is not possible that test scores could cause a change in time spent studying. Am I correct? Therefore, time spent studying now must be the independent variable, and the test score must be the dependent variable, because the sentence does not make sense the other way around. Can you follow? As defined earlier, a variable as opposed to a constant is simply anything that can vary, and that many researchers consistently look at the relationship between two variables. While variation of an independent variable can influence the variation of where to study the effects of both variables or of their focus, it's tantamount to saying that college performance could basically, could basically the result of having a poor construction of their curriculum, not identifying, for example, the industrial revolution that we are currently facing. Dependent and the independent variables are also important because they determine the cause and effects in research. Although not all independent and dependent variables are causal related variables, the notion of cause and effect can help clarify the idea of independence in the independent variable and dependence in the dependent variable. Next, we have intervening variables and the moderating variables. Intervening variables are sometimes called a mediator variable. So they have the same, they are are alike, these intervening variables and moderating variables. So what are these variables? These are theoretical variable which a researcher uses to explain a cause or connection between other study variables. So meaning, these are variables that changes the relationship between dependent and independent variable by strengthening or weakening the intervening variables. For example, uh, you are studying the socioeconomic status and reading ability in children. You hypothesize that parental education level is a mediator, correct? This means that socioeconomic status affects reading ability, meaning through its influence on parental education levels. You use a descriptive research design for this study after collecting data on each of the variables you perform statistically. Statistical analysis to check whether socioeconomic status predicts parental education levels, parental education level predicts child reading ability, and the correlation between socioeconomic status and child reading ability. So you see, moderating variables are basically the reason why we have what they call this, a progress when it comes to the dependent variable. Our study is the socioeconomic status and the reading ability of the children. Now, of course, another variable must be considered, and that particular variable is the moderating variable, or what we call the mediator variable. And the mediator variable here is the parental involvement. Of course, yes, we cannot say there's an assumption that if you are in the lower class, you have poor reading ability. Am I correct? But then again, there is a mediating variable, and that mediating variable is the parental involvement. Yes, you are in the lower class, but then again, your parent, okay, your parent is persistent in trying to look for the resources, in trying to teach you on how to read. Another mediating variable is your persistence as a child, as a student. Correct? While intervening variable, on the other hand, another characteristic is that it affects the relationship between an independent variable and a dependent variable. In what sense? Intervening variables pop up in different research situations. For example, level of education and then the spending. The spending of these people. The independent variable now is the level of education. Now the spending is the dependent variable. If, for example, you are a doctorate graduate, if you obtain a doctorate degree, does it mean that you are spending much of your money or spending less of your money? It depends now. You cannot actually measure that immediately or yes, directly. It depends on another variable. And what is that another variable? Income. Right? Of course, it doesn't mean that you are a doctorate graduate. You have what they call this, higher salary than a bachelor's graduate, correct? Of course, if you have a low or if you are in the low salary range, do not expect that you spend much, right? So, can you follow what is intervening variable or moderating variable? So I think as a researcher, we have to identify this. Sometimes we tend to focus ourselves to our variables themselves. Yes, that is correct. That is correct. However, let us try to consider this for us to identify, for us to obtain a valid and reliable result that other people would notice, that other people would accept. Correct? And sometimes these are the questions of our panelists. Correct? Because our panelists will try to include variable which are affecting your study or your results. Another, poverty and life expectancy. Poverty and life expectancy. Your independent variable is poverty. And the life expectancy is your dependent variable. Now, do you think, of course, again, there is an assumption. There is an assumption there. In not so affluent country, okay, for example, in an affluent country, of course, poverty is not existing there because it's an affluent country. Now, does it mean they have longer life expectancy? Yes, that is possible because there are a lot of means to survive, correct? But we cannot really measure that because there is an intervening variable or there is a mediating variable. And what is that? And what is that? The worst healthcare or the healthcare that this particular country provides. Correct? Okay, in a poor country, in a net in a country where poverty is existing, rather, we say that because of poverty, there is actually a decline when it comes to life expectancy. Again, that is possible, correct? That is possible. However, there is an intervening variable for that study. And again, that is the worst healthcare. Not because of the poverty, it's because of the worst healthcare. Next, for example, this one. Your independent variable are the following: user service modules, housekeeping modules, technical workflow, access platforms. And the dependent variables, the efficiency achieved through automation of library functions. Or in a simple setup or example, you as a teacher, you're very efficient. You have the qualities, correct? You have the qualities of being an efficient teacher. You are a seasoned teacher. So meaning to say, there would be a quality education that you can provide to your students, correct? How about given the online distance learning? What will be our intervening variable? Could we say that if you are an efficient teacher, you could provide quality education given we have this online distance learning? Of course not, because there is an intervening variable there, and that is the learning management system that you have, or your what they call this, your perception about technologies, your skills in technology, if you're a tech savvy or not, if you are resistant or not when it comes to these innovations. Another variables that we need to consider are the control variables and the extraneous variables. Control variables, these are also controlling variables which are considered as constant and do not change during a study, meaning they have no effect on other variables. Okay? For example, does soil quality affect plant growth? Again, Does soil quality affect plant growth? What are your control variables here? We have temperature. We have amount of light. We have amount of water. Correct? Because a control variable is anything that is held constant or limited in a research study. It's a variable that is not of interest to the study's aims, but is controlled because it could influence the outcomes. Another, do people with the fear of spiders, like me, I hate spiders, perceive spider images faster than other people? Actually, for example, we are eating crabs. Uh, I don't eat crabs because I see crabs as spiders. So is it correct? So what are the control variables now? Computer screen, brightness, room lighting, visual stimuli sizes. Okay? So these are control variables. Variables may be controlled directly by holding them constant throughout a study, or they may be controlled indirectly through methods like randomization or statistical control. So meaning to say, for example, you are experimenting. You're experimenting that the quality of soil affects the plant growth. Of course, you have this soil 1, soil 2, and soil 3. And then you have plant 1, plant 2, plant 3. The same plant, but different soils. So you are now giving emphasis if this particular plant soil affects the growth of the plant. So what are now the considered control groups, or control variables rather? The amount of water. Of course, you have to make sure the amount of water is the same to all the pots, for example. The quality of light. Are you getting my point? Why? Because this amount of water and amount of light might affect the growth of the plants, not because of the soil. See, if we control these groups, the amount of light, the amount of water, if we control these variables, we are sure that the soil itself is the basis of the effect or the outcome. Now, let's proceed to extraneous variables. Extraneous variables are unwanted variables which can unintentionally change a study's results or how a researcher interprets those results. For example, is memory capacity related to test performance? Again, is memory capacity related to test performance? Now, what are the extraneous variables? Taking time of the day. Of course, if you are, for example, if you will be taking a test in the late evening, you already exhausted all your brain cells. Therefore, the time of taking that particular test will now be called extraneous variable, because this extraneous variable will affect now the result of your study. Another, does sleep deprivation affect driving ability? Does sleep deprivation affect driving ability? So what are the extraneous variables? For example, road conditions, of course. Years of driving experience. And noise. You know what? I have this we have these drivers in school wherein, though they are deprived with sleep, with 8 hours sleep, they still manage to drive safely, to drive what they call this, accurately and with the presence of mind. Why? Because of their experience. And this experience now is called the extraneous variable. Okay? Okay. For example, we have This is basically a while back. Now, let's proceed to confounding variable. This is confounding variables are needs to be considered. Most of the researchers, or most of the studies, confounding variables, or I'll start defining first the composite variables because that is easy. A composite variable is two or more variables combined to make a more complex variable. For example, uh, what they call this? The job satisfaction. Job satisfaction is a composite variable. Why? Because there are a lot of factors affecting job satisfaction, or there are a lot of things to consider before we try to generalize the job satisfaction of our employees. The environment, the leadership, the workloads, the schedule. Correct? So before we come up with a general overview of our composite variable, there are a lot of things to consider, just like what I have mentioned. Another is BMI, the body mass index. Okay, before we get the BMI of a particular person, we tend to measure the height, measure the weight, and all. Correct? So these are composite variables. Now, we proceed to confounding variables. A confounding variable is one you did not account for that can disguise another variable's effects. Okay, so what do we mean by that? A confounding variable is an unmeasured third variable that influences both the supposed cause and the supposed effect. Unlike an extraneous variables are just affecting the results, correct? However, in confounding variable, it affects both the cause and the effect, both the independent and the dependent variable. It is important to consider potential confounding variables and account for them in your research design to ensure your results are valid. Confounding variables are type of extraneous variable that are related to a study's independent and dependent variables. A variable must need to meet two conditions to be a confounder. First, it must be correlated with the independent variable. This may be a causal relationship, but it does not have to be. Sorry. It must be causally related to the dependent variable. Example of confounding variable: you collect data on sunburns and ice cream consumption. This is very basic. You collect data on sunburns and ice cream consumption. You find that higher ice cream consumption is associated with higher probability of sunburn. Does that mean ice cream consumption causes sunburn? Of course not. Here, the confounding variable is temperature. High temperature cause people to both eat more ice cream and spend more time outdoors under the sun, correct? Resulting in more sunburns. A confounding variable is a type of extraneous variable that is associated, again, with both the independent and dependent variable. Another example. You want to determine the relationship of your level of education to the success. Level of education and your success as a person. Okay? Level of education and your success as a person. Now, what will be now your confounding variable? What will be now your confounding variable? And I think your confounding variable would be your experience, your life experiences, correct? Your life experiences will affect the drive that you have to pursue your studies, because you know that education is a must. Your education is your ticket to be successful in the near future. And so your life experiences would determine your success. We have different definitions of success, correct? Sometimes because of achievements, we feel fulfilled, we feel satisfied, and we feel we actually say that we are successful. Sometimes happiness. If you're happy, then you are successful. So see, life experiences is now the confounding variable of your study, and you have to consider that. You have to consider that. And sometimes, confounding variables are basically considered by your panelists. Therefore, we have to make sure we reduce the impact of this through restriction, matching, statistical control, and randomization. These are the four strategies that you may use to reduce the impact of confounding variables. Restriction. In this method, all you have to do is restrict your treatment group by only including subjects with the same values of potential confounding factors. So meaning to say, you are basically, what they call this, trying to make sure your respondents or your participants have the same level. Matching. In this method, you select a comparison group that matches with the treatment group. Each member of the comparison group should have a counterpart in the treatment group with the same values of potential confounders but different independent variables. Statistical control. If you have already collected the data, you can include the possible confounders as control variables in your regression models, meaning to say you can use them as your data, as your inputs in a particular statistical treatment. Randomization. Randomization ensures that with a sufficiently large sample, all potential confounding variables, even those you cannot directly observe in your study, will have the same average value between different groups. Again, the notion, the larger the sample size, the better the consistent your results would be. Now, quantitative variables. Okay? Quantitative variables. We have two types of quantitative variables, discrete variables and continuous variables. Discrete variables are realistically are numerical variables you can realistically count, meaning to say they are the counting numbers. They are basically whole numbers. Okay? Continuous variables. These unwanted variables can unintentionally change a study's results or how a researcher interprets those results, because we are using what they call this. We are using decimal values or what they call this, fractions here in continuous variables. Example of discrete variable: number of tables, number of students, number of books, number of absences. Continuous variables, we are basically measuring height, weight, volume, average, temperature, etc. Qualitative variables. So we have three types of qualitative variables, or should I say categorical variables. Binary variables. Any variables, sorry, I didn't change. I forgot to change the definition. When we say binary variables, we have only two options. We have just two responses, like the sex, male, female. What they call this? Yes or no answers, pass or fail responses. So these are example of binary variables. Nominal variables now are basically categorical variables which cannot be ranked, unlike with the ordinal variables. Example of nominal variables are religion, Okay, religion, uh, what more? Religion, the I'm sorry. Ordinal variables are educational attainment. Yes, they are categorical. However, we can actually rank them. We know the order. For example, bachelor's degree, master's degree, doctorate degree, and so on. Okay. So as you can see here, this is how other variables are do uh, uh, affect the result. Okay, or also the exposure variable. Okay, in covariates, or what we call the extraneous variable, no association with exposure or no association with the independent variable, but it has an effect when it comes to the outcome or the prediction. Okay, the predictor. Now, confounder variable has an interaction between the exposure, the independent variable has an interaction also with the outcome. Okay, also with it is basically covariance with the outcome. Did you get that? Of course, exposure variable, that is the independent. You are measuring that it has something to do with the outcome. It has something to do with your dependent variable. And of course, reverse causation, your outcome now would have an effect with your exposure variable. Okay? Okay. Let's proceed to correlational research design, or the test that we will be having when we use correlational research design. So again, let's try to identify the following because it's very important. Okay? Nominal, these are the categories cannot be ordered or ranked. For example, religion, marital status, political affiliations. Okay? Binary are nominal variables with only two categories: sex, test remarks such as passed or failed. Ordinal variables are categories can be ranked or ordered: educational attainment or the socioeconomic status, lower class, upper class, and middle class. However, in ordinal variable, they are still categorical because we cannot measure the difference between the ranks, between the orders. For example, you do not know exactly the difference between bachelor's and master's degree when it comes to the performance, correct? When it, yes, you can mention an assumption, but it's not exact. It's not accurate. Okay, unlike in quantitative. Okay, quantitative or continuous variables. Okay, we have two: the interval and the ratio. These are variables for which their central characteristic is that they can be measured along a continuum and they have a numerical value. On the other hand, ratio, these are interval variables, but with the added condition that zero of the measurement indicates that there is none of that variable. For example, interval is temperature. When we say temperature, 0 degrees Celsius, it doesn't mean you have no variable. That significant value is nothing or insignificant, correct? 0 degrees Celsius meaning to say it's a freezing, it's the freezing point. Meaning to say there is still a definition. There is still a significant description about such a zero, unlike in ratio. For example, 0 centimeter, zero weight, zero volume, meaning to say the variable or the item is not existing. The staff is not existing. So that is a ratio. Okay? So it's very important for us to identify first identify our variable, and then after that we identify the expected data. So are your expected data sex? Are your expected data measurements? Are your expected data temperatures? Are your expected data qualitative or quantitative data? Are they binary? Are they nominal? Are they ratio? Are they interval? So you have to answer those things before we proceed to the statistical test. Just like this. Okay? As you can see, these are the circles at the bottom part are the statistical tests. Okay? And we have to identify first our variable 1 and variable 2 before we try to determine what type of test. But before that, sorry, I want to discuss first normality, because we need to ponder this before we use, okay, we learn or discuss the statistical test under correlational. Again, the focus of my study, of my presentation, is just correlational. Okay, if you want to hear some information about uh, experimental or the comparative, you may email me to the to my email account later on. Okay, when we say normality, you can perform statistical tests on data that have been collected in a statistical valid manner, either through an experiment or through observations made using probability sampling methods. For a statistical test to be valid, your sample size needs to be large enough to approximate the true distribution of the population being studied. To determine which statistical test you need to use, whether your data meets certain assumptions or types of variables that you're dealing with, and one of which assumption is the normality. The normality says that the data must follow a normal distribution, or a bell curve. This assumption applies only to quantitative data. And for you to test normality, we have what we call the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test, or the Wilk-Shapiro test. So I have been advised that the Shapiro-Wilk test is generally more sensitive for sample size up to 1 or 2,000. I would therefore recommend looking at the Shapiro-Wilk first test first, then if necessary, looking at the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test as a backup. Both tests also have the tendency to be too sensitive for the purpose of selecting a parametric test when the sample size is larger than 1 or 200. Remember, when using statistical tests, it's very important to test normality, or to achieve normality. Or this is the bell curve. You know what? For example, you're conducting an experiment. Okay? You want to determine if your constructed module has something to do or can help to increase the performance of your students in mathematics. But upon selection of your participants, your participants in the experimental group are mathematically inclined. They are mathematically inclined, meaning to say, expected they would get higher scores, correct? Higher scores. Therefore, if you want if you want to validate that there is something wrong with your collection of respondent, or with your collection of data, you use normality, because you will see that the curve is what negatively inclined. Why? Why negatively inclined? Because most of your students will get higher scores. Remember, when we are referring to skewness, we are referring to tail. Negatively inclined, negatively skewed. Why? Because the tail is in negative, and then bulk of the scores, okay, is are located on the positive side, meaning to say higher scores. Your participants got higher scores. So see, first and foremost, please make sure, okay, you have you test your you use normality test, or it's actually basically plotting, okay, using histogram to determine the normality of your respondents. Next is the linearity. It's very important, okay, as a researcher, to determine the linearity. So what do I mean when linearity is considered in correlational research design? You must uh, expect or you must assume that your variables have a relationship to one another. Okay? Linearity describes the relationship between two or more variables when they tend to change at the same time. Meaning to say, the expectation is there that there is a relationship. The question now, sir, why do we need to conduct correlational research design if you're expecting that there is, you have already determined that there is a relationship between the two? The purpose of correlational research design is to determine the degree or the extent of the relationship. Okay? For example, what I have mentioned a while back, the the the, the amount of the amount you consume in eating ice cream, or the frequency uh, you're eating ice cream and you're having sunburns. See, of course, if you will be using those variables in correlational research design, okay, I think you failed the linearity. You failed this concept. Okay? Because first and foremost, you have to determine that there is a relation between the two. For example, the academic performance of the students and their level of complacency. Because you all know that the higher the level of the complacency, or the complacent a person you are, okay, the higher the probability that you will be compromising your works in terms of quality. So that is linearity. Okay, now we proceed to this. I hope you forgot all all parts of my discussion, but not this one. Okay? Not this one. As you can see, we only have two variables. Question. In using correlational research design, are we just referring to two variables? Yes. Variable 1 and the variable 2. But it depends on the results. It depends on the outcomes. Okay? Variable 1, if it is continuous, okay, if it is continuous, your variable 2 can be continuous, nominal, dichotomous, or binary, or ordinal. If it is continuous, you will be using person R. Pass the assumption under parametric test. When we say parametric test, we are using quantitative data. Okay? Quantitative data. Measurements. Okay? So continuous, we use person R. Continuous, ordinal, Spearman-Rho, or Kendall-Staubbe. As you can see, since they are not numbers, or they are not a quantitative data, okay, you can use Spearman-Rho. Meaning to say, when you have continuous and then categorical variable, you can use Spearman-Rho or Kendall-Staubbe. But basically, you use Spearman-Rho or Kendall-Staubbe when you have continuous as your first variable and then the other one is ordinal. Next, continuous, first variable, second variable is dichotomous. You will be using point biserial correlation. Next, continuous, nominal, you can use Kramer's V. Okay? Next, variable 1, again nominal, and then the variable 2 is continuous. You can use again Kramer's V. This is the same with the last one that I have mentioned in the first group. And then nominal, first variable. Second group, nominal and ordinal. You can use Kramer's V or contingence coefficient. Okay? Either Kramer's V or what we call the contingency coefficient. Next, variable 3, ordinal. A variable 1, ordinal. Variable 2, if it is continuous, Spearman-Rho, Kendall-Staubbe. Ordinal, Spearman-Rho, Kendall-Staubbe, or gamma coefficient. Ordinal, nominal, Kramer's V. And variable 1, dichotomous. Variable 2, nominal, ordinal, Kramer's V. Dichotomous, adds ratio or phi coefficient. Dichotomous, continuous, point biserial correlation. Okay? Now, let's try to understand the following using the description and the requirements and the descriptions. Okay, Pearson R. Variables 1 and 2 should be continuous. Okay, for example, academic performance, grades, and their number of absences. That is an example of Pearson R. When we use Pearson R. Relationship between variables 1 and 2 should be linear. Another reason why I did mention that the relationship between variables 1 and 2 should be linear is there must have, or they must have, okay, equal number of respondents. Okay, equal number of respondents. Meaning to say, the number of students who provided their academic performance or academic grades is the same with the number of students you obtain their number of absences. Okay? Variables 1 and 2 should be normal or bell curve, meaning to say it passed the normality test. Examples. Age and height. Age is a continuous variable, and so with height. Okay? Test scores and review hours. Math scores and science grades. Can you follow? Now, in Pearson R, we have what we call the regression. Okay? Simple linear regression, multiple linear regression, and logistic regression. So what do we have here? So yes, in Pearson R, we have continuous, and so with the regression. Now, when we use simple linear regression, if the predictor variable, which is the independent, and the outcome variable, which is the dependent, is just pertaining to one predictor and one outcome. For example, what is the effect of income on longevity? The income is your predictor. Basically, it is just one variable. And also longevity. Again, that is continuous, the years in service. Okay? And that is just one outcome or one dependent variable. If that would be the case, we are using simple linear regression. Okay? Again, that is simple linear regression. Meaning to say, these are the examples of Pearson R. These are the classification of Pearson R that we need to utilize, or that we need to include in our statistical test. I'm so sorry. I'm lacking of I think I'm being dehydrated. Okay. Next is multiple linear regression. So predictor, two or more predictors. Again, two or more predictors, and then the outcome is one. Meaning to say, we will be using the multiple linear regression. For example, what is the effect of income and minutes of exercise per day on longevity? Gets? What is the effect of income and minutes of exercise? So these are the two predictor variables that you have. And you only have one outcome variable, and that is days on, longevity, years in service. Logistic regression, on the other hand, is again continuous, and then the outcome variable would be binary. Okay? Continuous and then binary. Meaning to say, this is basically used if we have quantitative and categorical variable. Example, what is the effect of drug dosage on test survival of a test subject? Drug dosage is continuous, correct? However, survival of a test subject, meaning to say you passed or you failed, that is binary because you only have two options. And if that would be the case, that is logistic regression. For example, another test is what is the effect of the number of hours you spend reviewing in passing an exam. That is basically logistic regression, because the number of hours you spent reviewing, that is continuous, that is the predictor variable, and then the outcome variable is you passed or you failed the test. Okay, another difference between simple and multiple regression, just like what I have mentioned, one regression coefficient for each independent variable. So meaning to say, one regression meaning to say that is the outcome variable to each independent variable. Y is basically correlated to x sub 1 and y is being correlated to x sub 2. Okay? In simple, r squared, proportion of variation independent variable y predictable from x. However, in r squared, okay, in multiple regression, proportion of variation independent variable y predictable by set of independent variables, which are x sub 1 and x sub 2. Okay? Another illustration of linear regression or the simple regression and the multiple regression. Okay? As you can see, the outcome is our predictor variables are affecting our outcome variable or our dependent variable. Next, we have Spearman-Rho or Kendall-Staub-B. Okay? Requirements, variables 1 and 2 can be continuous. Okay? Or one variable is continuous and the other variable is ordinal. Okay? Or both variables are ordinal. So examples, the relationship of physics and mathematics scores. They are both continuous. So that is possible that we need to use a Spearman or Kendall-Staub-B. However, of course, as a statistician, I would prefer to use person R in determining the relationship of physics and mathematics scores. Correct? Another, educational attainment and socioeconomic status. Educational attainment is an ordinal, and so with the socioeconomic status. Meaning to say, if you are ranking, if you emphasize or highlight ranks or orders in your study, it's a must that you use Spearman-Rho or Kendall-Staub-B. Okay? Academic performance and socioeconomic status. One continuous and the other is ordinal. Okay? And also, another important thing that you must consider in using Spearman-Rho is that in person R in Spearman rank correlation, it is a non-parametric test, that is correct, a non-parametric test that is used to measure the degree of association between two variables. The Spearman rank correlation test does not carry any assumption about the distribution of the data. Okay? And it is the appropriate correlation analysis when the variables are measured on a scale that is at least ordinal. From the term itself, Spearman rank, therefore, our data must be ranked or ordered. Meaning to say, this is now the counterpart of the Pearson R. In Pearson R, that is in parametric test. And then, the non-parametric test, the counterpart of Pearson R in non-parametric test would be the Pearson R. Okay? Also, Spearman correlation can examine, is there a statistically significant relationship between participants' level of education or the educational attainment, for example, high school, bachelor's or graduate degree, and their starting salary? Okay? Is there a statistically significant relationship between horses' finishing position, a race, and horses' age? The assumption now of the Spearman correlation are that data must be at least ordinal and the scores on one variable must be monotonically related to the other variable. Okay? Can you follow? Now, let's proceed to point biserial correlation. One of the two variables should be continuous, interval, or ratio. The other variable should be dichotomous. Okay? One of the two variables should be continuous, interval, or ratio. The other variable should be dichotomous. The continuous variable should be normal for each category of the dichotomous variable. Okay? The continuous variable should have equal variances for two categories of the dichotomous variable. Example, sex, male and female, and college admission test scores range between 0 and 100%. Another, sex, male and female, and other number of years of working as an electrician. Okay? Add point by serial correlation is basically denoting that a correlation measure of the strength of association between a continuous level variable and a binary variable, or dichotomous variable rather. Binary variables are variables of nominal scale with only two values, which I have mentioned a while back. Okay? They are also known as dichotomous variables or dummy variables in regression analysis. Okay, binary variables are commonly used to express the existence of a certain characteristics. For example, reacted or did not react in a chemistry sample, or the membership in a group of observed specimen, male or female, their sex. If needed for analysis, remember this, binary variables can also be created artificially by grouping cases or recoding variables. For example, how will you determine that a student would get passed or uh, would get a failing score or considered fail? Okay. However, it is not advised to artificially create a binary variable from ordinal or continuous level, because ordinal and continuous data and thus make any correlation analysis more reliable. For ordinal data, use the Spearman correlation coefficient. For continuous level data, use Pearson bivariate correlation, or the Pearson R, which I have mentioned a while back. Like all correlation coefficients, the point biserial correlation coefficient measures the strength of association of two variables in a single measure ranging from -1 to +1, wherein 1 indicates a perfect negative association and the +1 indicates a perfect positive association. Okay? Example of point biserial correlation analysis are follow. For example, in biology, do fish react differently to red or green lighted stimulus as food signal? Is there an association between the color of the stimulus, red or light, and the reaction time? See, that is basically the relationship of a continuous variable, which is the reaction time, and the dichotomous variable, which are the stimulus, which is the stimulus, red or green light. Okay? Another, medicine. Does a cancer drug prolong life? How strong is the association between administering the drug, placebo or drug, and the length of survival after treatment? See, you categorized. You artificially grouped your one variable to make it dichotomous. Okay? Another, in terms of sociology, does gender have an influence on salary? Or does sex have an influence on salary? Is there an association between sex, which are male and female, with the income earned? Again, correlation between continuous and binary. And lastly, social psychology. Is satisfaction with life higher than the older you are? Is there an association between age group, elderly, not elderly, and satisfaction with life? So these are examples of studies that we can use point biserial correlation. Next, let's have the Kramer's V. Okay, the two variables should be nominal. Basically, the non-parametric tests that I am delivering are classifications of chi-square test. Okay, two variables should be nominal, or one variable may be nominal and the other variable is ordinal. And then for a 2 by 2 table, the Kramer's V and phi coefficient are equal. Okay, attitude towards legalizing abortion by religious identification. Both are nominal. Okay, another, performance appraisal and work-life balance perceptions. Again, both are performance appraisal. Of course, I would be using the nominal descriptions. Okay, not the scores. Okay, and work-life balance perceptions. So Kramer's V, or what we can actually use the gamma coefficient here. Okay, phi coefficient is same with the Kramer's V. However, in phi coefficient, both variables should be dichotomous. Well, in terms of the computation, they differ with the complexity of the computation, with the complexity of the process. But then again, the result is the same. Okay? Because the table is 2 by 2, the phi coefficient and Kramer's V are equal in terms of the analysis, in terms of the interpretation. Pet ownership and having a child. Yes or no? Yes or no? Gender is associated with political party preference. Yes or no? Administration opposition. Okay? Odds ratio or relative risk are these particular tests being used whether you are in line with, for example, diseases with medicines and all. One variable should be the outcome variable, while the other is the predictor variable. For example, health, fitness, obese and non-obese, and physical activities, active and non-active. Positive emotions, high and low, and accomplishment, contented and not contented. Okay. Another information about odds ratio and relative risk. Calculation of risk requires the use of people at risk. Remember that. It in the retrospective case control studies where the total number of exposed people is not available, the relative risk cannot be calculated. And OR, which is the odds ratio, is used as a measure of the strength of association between exposure and outcome. By contrast, in prospective studies or cohort studies rather, where the number at risk or number exposed is available, either now the relative risk or the odds ratio can be calculated. Another information, remember, relative risk is more easily understood than odds ratio. Why? Because in relative risk, the exposure is there, the exposure is evident. For this reason, it can be regarded as the better of the two measures from a practitioner's viewpoint. Odds ratio are, however, widely used because of situation in which they have mathematical advantages. The odds ratio can be regarded as an estimate of the relative risk when disease risk is low in both groups, say 20% or less. The approximation become less valid as baseline risk or effect size increases. For example, we will be using relative risk if, for example, there is the evidence or there is a high probability of getting disease if exposed and probability of getting disease if not exposed. So that is relative risk. Another example for relative risk is that probability of outcome if on drug and probability of outcome if on placebo. So that is basically relative risk. Okay? Odds ratio, on the other hand, adds that the disease were exposed and adds the controls were exposed. Okay? So basically, the relative risk and odds ratio are both relative measures of effect. As such, they are unaffected by changes in baseline risk, whether they are exposed or not, whether they are using this particular drug or not. In other words, studies carried out in different regions with different disease levels should give the same result. The strength of relative measures lied in portability. Okay? Last would be the gamma coefficient. two variables should be ordinal. Okay? Example, life satisfaction and happiness in life, telecommuting experience and job satisfaction. Okay? And my suggestion would be here, yes, we can have two answers binary here, but then again, okay, I hope they are ordinal. So meaning to we have high, we have low, average, and high. Okay, we have what they call this, we can rank the responses of our students, okay, based on their perceptions. The gamma coefficient, also called the gamma statistic or Goodman and Kruskal gamma, tells us how closely two pairs of data points match. Okay, if you are low, if you have low life satisfaction and low happiness in life, if you have a low telecommuting experience, if you have a negative telecommuting experience, and what will be the effect of this, or what is be the association of this with our job satisfaction, with how we with how we see our job. Okay, gamma tests for an association between points and also tells us the strengths of association. The goal of the test is to be able to predict where new values will rank. For example, if score A scores low for question 1 and high for question 2, will score B also result in low-high response? You see, you tend to get the relationship of the statements. For example, you are using Likert scale. Okay? You have Likert scale for one particular variable, and you have a Likert scale on one particular variable. If you answered yes, if you agree with this particular statement, what will be your response with the other statement from the other question or from the other Likert scale? Gamma can be calculated for ordinal ordered variables that are continuous variables like height or weight, or discrete variables like hat or hottest, while there are other coefficients that can calculate relationship for these types of variables, like the Somers D. It is also particularly useful when your data has outliers. By the way, when you have extreme outliers, please remove them. Okay, when you have extreme outliers, for example, one extreme outlier, okay, when you will see the outlier when you actually use scatter plot, or when you illustrate your data using scatter plot. For some fields of study, it may be the preferred method for all ordinal data arranged in a bivariate table. If you have two dichotomous variable, okay, you can still you can use phi coefficient, just like what I have mentioned a while back. Okay, the gamma coefficient ranges again, okay, between -1 and 1. 1 perfect positive correlation, and the -1 perfect inverse correlation. I just want to accentuate this one. I hope we can eradicate the misconstrue or the misconception of what they call this, of our researchers, of other researchers, of our students when it comes to positive and negative correlation. They say uh, they say that when we have negative correlation, this is misconception again that we need to eradicate from our students or from other researchers. When they obtain negative correlation, when they obtain negative correlation, they said they tend to interpret that there is no relationship at all. That is incorrect. Okay, when they obtain positive correlation, that would be the time that they would say there is a relationship. No, even if you get negative or inverse relationship, there's still a relationship. It's just vary when it comes to the direction. For example, positive relationship, when one increases, the other one also increases. When one decreases, the other one decreases. Okay, that is basically positive correlation. Negative correlation, on the other hand, if one increases, the other one decreases. If one decreases, the other one increases. Okay, and of course, the zero correlation. The zero correlation, or no association between the variables. Okay, once again, please, I hope you try to familiarize our illustration when it comes to our correlational research, correlation statistical test intended to correlational research design. Okay, So this is a proposed rule of thumb for interpreting the size of a correlation coefficients. Okay, since I have mentioned, when we are using correlational research design, we are just identifying the degree of relationship. Okay, the degree of relationship, whether you have high positive or high negative, very high positive or very high negative, or low positive or low negative correlation. It depends now on how you analyze your data. It depends now on how you tend to conclude whatever data that you have. And basically, if you have low positive or negative correlation, that would be the time that you insert, okay, that you include, okay, the other variables that we have mentioned a while back. For you to say, for you to verify, why is that I only have low positive correlation? Might be,
So sorry to
okay, there is
interrupt.
a,
We have 2 minutes left.
thank you so much. There is a possibility that a confounding variable is introduced. An extraneous variable affect the result of your study. Okay? The person product moment or coefficient of correlation R, the person product coefficient of correlation R is an index of relationship. Just like what I have uh, shown to you or projected a while back, that is R actually, or the raw. The independent variable can be represented by X, while the dependent variable can also be represented by Y. So types of mathematical relationship between two variables, we have positive versus negative, linear versus nonlinear, monotonic versus non-monotonic, strong versus weak. Okay? When we say positive, negative, as you can see, one is positive, meaning to say as one variable increases, the other one also increases. Negative correlation, as one variable increases, the other one also uh, uh, the other one decreases. Okay? The Pearson correlation R can take a range of values from +1 to -1. Okay, the stronger the association of the two variables, the closer the Pearson correlation coefficient R will be either to +1 or -1. Okay? Values for R between +1 and -1, for example, R equals 0.8 or -0.4, indicate that there is a variation around the line of best fit. The closer the value of R to 0, the greater the variation about around the lines of the best fit. Linear versus non-linear. As you can see, the first linear, okay, you can see that as one particular variable moves, the other one also moves. Okay? To test to see whether your two variables form a linear relationship, you simply need to plot them on a graph or a scatter plot rather, and visually inspect the graph's shape. In the diagram, okay, as you can see, you will find a few different examples of linear relationship and some linear relationship. It is not appropriate to analyze a nonlinear relationship using person or product moment or correlation, because in the first place, okay, there is no correlation at all. So no need for you to test that. Next is the monotonic. Remember, in monotonic relationship, the variable tends to move in the same relative direction. Okay? But not necessarily at constant rate. So all linear correlation are monotonic because as one variable moves, the other one also moves in the same direction or in the same relative direction. So all linear correlation are monotonic, but the opposite is not always true. But we can also have monotonic non-linear. Okay? Next, statistical tests work by calculating a test statistic. Okay? It is for us to determine if it is strong or weak. Okay? A number that describes how much the relationship between variables in your test differs from the null hypothesis of no relationship. It then calculates a p-value. The p-value estimates how likely it is that you would see the difference described by the test statistic if the null hypothesis of no relationship were true. If the value of the test statistics more extremely than the statistic calculated from the null hypothesis, then you can infer a statistically significant relationship between the predictor and the outcome variables. So now, how many minutes left again, Miss Dr. Austin?
Just 1 more minute.
Okay. I think I would just be giving the presentation to Dr. Austin to mention to for you to read the following or the remaining topics. Okay. So I just want to emphasize this too, ensuring validity and reliability. Of course, it's very important to identify this. Why? Because whatever or how tedious your study is, how accurate it is, we must make sure, okay, we emphasize or we consider the two, the validity and the reliability. The reliability and validity of your results depend on creating a strong research design, choosing appropriate methods and samples, and conducting the research carefully and consistently. Ensuring validity, we have two: choose appropriate methods of measurement and use appropriate sampling methods to select your subjects. Ensure that your method and measurement technique are high quality and targeted to measure exactly what you want to know. They should be thoroughly researched and based on existing knowledge. On the other hand, use appropriate sampling methods to select your subject to produce valid generalizable results. Clearly define the population you are researching. Again, clearly define the population you are researching. For example, people from a specific age, range, geographical location, or profession. Next, ensure that you have enough participants and that they are representative of the population. Last two, apply your methods consistently, standardize the condition of your research in ensuring the reliability. Plan your method carefully to make sure you carry out the same steps in the same way for each measurement. This is especially important if multiple researchers are involved. For example, you are conducting interviews or observation, clearly define how specific behaviors or responses will be counted and make sure questions are phrased the same way each time. Standardize the condition of your research. When you collect your data, keep the circumstances as consistent as possible to reduce the influence of external factors that might create variation in the results. For example, in an experimental setup, make sure all participants are given the same information and tested under the same condition. Okay? So again, please make sure we take into consideration validity and reliability. But then again, we can achieve this too when we, of course, we try to analyze the step-by-step process. We accurately analyze, scrutinize the step-by-step process up until the usage of the statistical test in conducting a research study. I would like to end this presentation from what Ms. Nora Hurston said about research. Research is formalized curiosity. Yes, just like what I have mentioned a while back, all of us have something to do, have something to say with the existent problems. But then again, these are just claims. But to formalize these claims, to validate these claims, we need to conduct a research. It is poking and prying with a purpose. It is basically contributing greatly to our society. Once again, this is Mr. Alberto M. Dizon. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so very much, Alberto, for that very interesting and very insightful presentation that every researcher would like to know. So I think we do have 5 minutes more for Q&A. So if anyone has any questions or concerns or clarifications to make regarding this workshop, you can put them in the chat box or you can unmute yourself and directly ask the question. So I would like to hand over the floor to the audience. The audience, over to you. If you have any questions about the seminar or anything that you would like to ask Alberto, you can do so now. Thank you. I think there's a question for you, Alberto, from Janet Lin. How is descriptive design different from the survey research design? So if you can answer that, would be great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Austin. Thank you so much for that question, Dr. Janet or Miss Janet. How is descriptive design different from the survey research design? Basically, it depends on how you what they call this. It depends on how you present your data. Okay, remember in descriptive research design, if you are under quantitative, you will be using frequencies. Okay, if you are using frequencies, if you're using numerical measurements for you to be able to give interpretation or analysis from the responses of your respondents. However, when we are talking about survey research design, it depends again on what particular data that you will be obtaining. If are your questions are open-ended questions or not? Okay, are your questions are close-ended or open-ended rather? Are you pertaining will you be using what they call this numerical data in terms of providing analysis with this particular research design, which is the survey research design? Again, it depends on what particular one particular interpretation presentations that you will be using. Again, if it is descriptive research design, okay, numerical data are used, numerical presentations are used, and then there, of course, there is a descriptions about that pertaining to the perceptions of your respondents. In a survey research design, that is possible. That is possible to what they call this, to correlate this, to associate this to descriptive research design. However, the consideration is that you use numerical presentations. For Dr. Jen, is if statistics studied with research, could you describe any possible continuum? I have asked UPD about this, and they said 1 year ago, no continuum established yet. Share if there is. To be honest, Dr. I think this is Dr. Camara. Okay. The question is, if statistics studies stock posts which with research, could you describe any possible continuum? I have asked UPD about this and they said 1 year ago. No, continuum is yes. Actually, it depends on it's very important for us to determine that because just like what I have mentioned, there is in quantitative research, dynamic is considered. Okay, we have different since we are pertaining to numbers, we are pertaining to numerical values. Okay, of course, we tend to base our interpretation for this with these numbers. So again, that is correct that we need to make sure, okay, we tend to study frequently or to conduct frequently these studies for us to be able. That is the reason why reliability is important in quantitative research design or in the use of statistics for us to measure that these numbers or these statistics, okay, these statistics are accurate to generalize a certain concept. Okay, to generalize a certain concept. If, for example, they say 1 year ago, okay, that is better. Okay, that is better. Okay, if you want 6 months, if you want as frequent as frequently as possible, that's okay. Why? Again, my notion or my stand is because we are just using numbers for us to interpret or to give analysis. We depend our analysis from these numbers. Okay? Just unlike in qualitative, it's deeper in the sense that we are really trying to scrutinize the responses of our students. Is it right to say that qualitative research design is also descriptive research design? Actually, I always get that question. I always, students always raise that particular questions. You know what? Uh, when we are referring to qualitative research design, it's very important to understand that we use thematic analysis. For me, we use thematic analysis. Therefore, we use categories. We use classifications in terms of analyzing, okay, in terms of giving analysis from the responses of our students. On the other hand, if you use numerical numbers, numerical data, okay, I think it would lead to the use of descriptive research design. Because in descriptive research design, the definition, if we base my answer, if we will base our argument with the definition, yes, descriptive research design explains, describes a particular scenario, a particular circumstances with the help of numbers, with the help of numerical values. Okay? There is a controversy in the use of Slovin's form in determining a sample. Actually, yes, that's if the population is not large enough, hence Dr. Bernales, the previous director of recommended the use of formula with the standard error and standard value of 2.50. What can you say about the relative value of a large enough population size? You know what? First, yes, since I am teaching inferential statistics in our school, I am not basically what they call this. I am not basically discussing Slovens. Okay, why? Because in one of the conferences or webinars that I have attended, they uh, they told me that there is actually what they call this uh, deficiency when it comes to the 95%. While because in Sloven's formula, we are using the 95% confidence level, meaning to say the 5% level of the 5% level of significance. Okay, so we use the Rausoft. I introduce a Rausoft to our students because in terms of the level of significance, okay, it is much lower than the 95% or than the 5% of the Sloven's formula. And I think, okay, by what you have mentioned, which is the Conrad formula with the standard error and the standard value of 2.58, I think we can be able to really specify who particular uh, respondents are really fit, are really appropriate to our study. Of course, the higher the level of the error, which is 5% versus the 2.58%, okay, I think 2.58% would be accurate enough. Okay, for we are pertaining to error, we are pertaining to much higher confidence level than 95%. Okay. Another thing when it comes to large enough population size, I think it's okay, it's we can use the Conrad formula, okay, given this 2.58%. And but of course, if we want to test the reliability of the results that we have, we can we can use this particular study given different respondents, and that would be in that sense, we are basically trying this particular study. We are trying to conduct this particular study to more respondents for us to gather uh, accurate or reliable results. And then valuable. Thank you so much, Mary Ann Lanuza, for that. Uh, okay. If there are no questions, once again, thank you so much for sparing your precious time with me this afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Austin.